Hello, and welcome to this week's special bonus episode. As we have discussed previously, Hebrew, the language of the Old Testament, much like Greek, the language of the New Testament, is an image-based language. It paints an incredibly vivid and detailed picture, one that English simply fails to capture. It often requires entire paragraphs of English in order to convey the full idea that is captured and painted by a single Hebrew word. As I have been studying and translating the Hebrew words in the Psalms as a part of my own attempt at a paraphrase translation hybrid, I have been fascinated and captivated by the richness of what truly lies in these texts. And so I have decided to share some of what I have found there, one digestible piece at a time. Last time, we talked about the choices that we face in this life, the allure of both good and bad, the pull of both violence and peace. But even if we want to aim higher, even if we do recognize the repulsive stain that covers your life if you choose to go low and wallow in the mud and shit, if we are being honest and not just deluding ourselves, we often fail despite our best efforts. We may be sincerely aiming up, but we often find ourselves succumbing to the less than admirable versions of ourselves. The thing to understand is that perfection is not only unrealistic, it is not the requirement. That is what we aim for, and with sincere effort behind those aims. But the failure to touch the stars doesn't actually condemn us in the end. The failure to even strive for them does. So today, I want to talk about forgiveness. God's forgiveness, our own ability to likewise forgive others, and even our ability to show the same kind of forgiveness to ourselves, which for many people can often be even harder than trying to forgive others. There are 3 primary Hebrew words for forgiveness, and they paint a much more helpful picture than our English word does, especially after the way that our word has been twisted into such an inaccurate and unrealistic thing, mostly by the church, who, as usual, thought that God didn't go far enough and that he needed their help in order to achieve real glory, as defined by them. So let me start off by assuring you that forgiveness does not mean that whatever happened was not wrong. It does not even mean that it was less wrong than it actually was. Wrong is wrong, and forgiveness doesn't change that, not a drop of it. If you were abused and you reach a place where you are able to forgive your abuser, that does not mean that the abuse was okay, or that it doesn't really matter anymore. That it has now been ruled no big deal. It also does not mean that you are now obligated to become best friends with your abuser, and that you must prove that your forgiveness is genuine by reintegrating them into your life. Those 2 things are not necessarily connected. Having a place in your life is something that is earned. It is not a right for anyone. Forgiveness doesn't mean that black just became white and white just became black, that right and wrong simply disappeared and don't matter from here on out, or that they suddenly don't even exist anymore. One of the main things to understand is that forgiveness is not for the other person. They may never even know that you have forgiven them. And even if they did, in many situations, that wouldn't matter to them, and it might even anger them. Forgiveness really has nothing to do with them. Forgiveness is done primarily for the benefit of the one who is doing the forgiving. There is a saying that when you refuse to forgive and just live with that hate inside of you, that you are drinking poison and expecting the other person to die from it. That is true. Your lack of forgiveness is not hurting them. They don't know, and in many cases, they don't care what you feel about them. You do know. You are the one who is carrying it around with you. You are the one whose body and perspective this thing is poisoning. You are the one whose relationships it is infecting, leaking into them and contaminating them. So it is your life that the lack of forgiveness is ruining, not the person who wronged you. When you forgive, you are purging yourself of something toxic that is actively harming you. You are not saying that what the other person did to you was actually not that bad, and now it's okay. You are not even necessarily removing the consequences of what they did, because that is often outside of your control, and it is not your responsibility to try and take on anyway. You are not saying that you are going to pretend like it never happened and turn a blind eye. That someone who, for example, has betrayed your trust in a serious way is now going to be treated as though they have proven themselves to be trustworthy instead, when they have not earned that benefit of the doubt from you like anyone else would have to do first. There is a difference between forgiveness and endangering yourself for a false, performative show. There is a difference between forgiveness and being blindly naive, while claiming that it is somehow a virtue to pretend to be blind, and that doing so somehow proves that the forgiveness is genuine. And by implication, not doing that proves that the forgiveness is lacking in something. None of that is true. So let's wipe the slate clean and start anew. Let's look at 3 Hebrew words, ones that the Bible chose, to see 3 different kinds of forgiveness. And with each one, let's try to think about them in terms of God's forgiveness towards us when we let Him down, our forgiveness of others when they let us down, and our own forgiveness to ourselves when we each let ourselves down. The first of 3 distinct types of forgiveness is selika. To put it simply, selika is a pardon. It is not a negating of what did take place. It is a pardon from the deserved consequences of what was done. Selika paints the picture of someone who has committed a crime. They have been convicted. They did it, and it was wrong. This part is no longer something that is up for debate. They are guilty, and their punishment is deserved. The legitimate sentence has been passed. And in the same way that a president can pardon a criminal, which does not mean that they were not found guilty by an honest jury, merely that he is removing the consequences, and just the consequences. Selika, likewise, is a pardon for having committed the crime itself. The penalties for the offense have been wiped from the record, as though you had been found not guilty, but the conviction stands. The pardon is not a moral comment on the crime itself. For example, if you are a murderer and you are pardoned by the President of the United States, that does not mean that the laws against murder were just wiped out and changed, and suddenly murder is not wrong anymore, and it is no longer against the law to do it. It means that the consequences for the individual of the guilt that they carry has been wiped from the official record. It is not a statement on the crime itself. It is not even necessarily a statement about the individual criminal, and it is definitely not about voicing approval for either one. It is merely a removal of the axe that justly hangs over their head. The second kind of forgiveness takes things a level deeper. Mekala paints the picture of the wiping out of a debt. Mekala is about not holding someone responsible for what they very much do legally owe you. You are annulling the debt and restoring a debt-free status to the relationship. You are releasing your own right to hound, resent, or bear ill will towards the person who owes you something until they pay up, because you are the one who has the power to decide that they do not owe you that thing anymore. The deepest and highest level of forgiveness is kapara. Kapara transcends forgiveness as we know it and as we have painted it so far. Kapara is about so much more than an official pardon or even a blotting out of a legitimate debt. Kapara involves purification. This brings you to a place where perfect atonement has been achieved. The root of this word is the word for covering, so it implies concealing and removing the sin itself. But this is about more than hiding the sin. It is about removing it as though it had never occurred. This word paints the picture of washing a stain out of a garment. It is now gone, as though it had never existed. This type of forgiveness actually removes the sin itself, and therefore all of its staining effects along with it. Kapara is about the ultimate cleansing of the soul from its crime, and where applicable, the cleansing and restoration of the relationship. All three of these different types of forgiveness are used in the Bible, and all three are invoked in the confession that is used at the celebration of Yom Kippur, otherwise known as the Day of Atonement, Kapora. In asking God for Selika, you are asking him to forgive the offense that you admit you have committed against him. You are throwing yourself on the mercy of the court and asking him to pardon your crime simply because he is the one in the position of authority who has the option to do that, not because mercy is deserved or because the crime wasn't actually that bad. In asking God for Mekala, you are asking him to forgive the debt that you acknowledge that you do owe to him, one that you can never pay. You are asking him to blot that debt out at the cost of his own loss. You are asking him to accept that damage that you inflicted on him and to not seek the compensation that you do owe him. Basically, you are asking him not to sue you in order to make himself whole and to let you off the hook for the damages that he has had to pay for because of you. In asking God for kapara, you are asking him to cleanse your soul from the stains of your crime and to remove the negative ramifications of what you have done to yourself in making yourself into a criminal. You are asking him to make it as though the stain of that crime had never happened in the first place. You are asking him to atone for what you did and to restore you to a perfectly clean status. But it is one thing for God to do those things. He is God. How do we apply this to our own actions? When you reach a level of forgiveness where you can extend salika to someone who has violated you in a way that was wrong, you are not saying that that behavior was okay. You are not saying that they are actually a great person and that it was all a misunderstanding that didn't really matter. You are not saying that you want to be their best friend forever now and have them move into your home to live with you as an adopted sibling until the trumpet sounds. No performance is necessary here. You are foregoing whatever level of punishment that you have access to, whatever punishment that you did have the ability to justly inflict on them. Not a vindictive free-for-all, which is always wrong, but even the just punishment. Maybe you had the ability to ruin their reputation, not by lying about them, which would be a revenge free-for-all, but merely by making the thing that they had done known. And now you are sparing them that consequence. Now, even that does not mean that you will lie to protect them. It does not mean that you will go out of your way to cover up what they did for them, and that it is now your job to make sure that no one else ever knows about it. There may even be certain circumstances where you need to tell other people so that they are warned and someone else is protected from harm. But you are not trying to inflict punishment at this point. You are just trying to do the right thing for all involved, whatever that may be. Or maybe other people have nothing to do with it. Maybe you were freezing this person out in punishment. If you extend salika to them, that doesn't mean that now you need to buy them the house next door and be their best friend. It means that you are releasing that feeling of authority that gives you the right to personally exact justice by inflicting your own consequences on them for the thing that they did. Whatever it was that you had the ability to do to them, you are pardoning them from that personal penalty. There may be things that are beyond your control. Legal ramifications, for example. Those are not your job to go about fixing for someone else. Your forgiveness is about your personal brand of punishment and the decision to forego that. In other cases, you may reach a deeper level of forgiveness and arrive at mekhala, in which case you are forgiving the debt that you have been having to carry the burden of yourself because they have not paid you what they rightly owed you. This is about you releasing the resentment that you carry against them for the legitimate harm that they did inflict on your life. In some cases, you may even achieve kapara But kapara requires atonement. And while God can achieve atonement for us, we are not God. We are made in the image of God, and so we try to reflect His higher transcendence in our treatment of others, while also acknowledging our own human limitations. We are not always able to atone for something that someone else has done. God can, but we are not God, and we should not try to pretend that we are, because there is nothing virtuous about that delusional pretense. Very often, the burden for atoning for a wrong is the responsibility that lies on the other person. And as such, it is their job to figure that out, not yours. This is probably why the New Testament has stories where Jesus is often talking about forgiving someone who comes to you to make it right. Someone who is trying to atone. This is a level of forgiveness that is virtually impossible to achieve on your own unless you are God. And even if the other person is participating in the forgiveness process at this point, it takes time to reach this level of forgiveness, just like washing out a stain, where the relationship has truly been restored to such a degree that there is the complete erasure of what they did. And even the residue of it is finally gone, washed away. For that to be real takes time and effort. And there is nothing virtuous in pretending that something is real when it is not. Now, it is possible to reach this place, but it is also unrealistic to think that all of the verses in the Bible that talk about forgiveness are referencing this kind of forgiveness. That is why it is helpful to be able to really know which word for forgiveness is being used in the particular verse that you are citing. The Word of God is truly as sharp as a double-edged sword, and only a child throws a blade around without being responsible enough to know what they are doing, because that is a very good way to take someone's head off. And a lot of people have proudly done exactly that in God's name. They are irresponsible, not virtuous. Now, when it comes to forgiving yourself, this can often be as hard and sometimes even harder than forgiving someone else. If you achieve the first level of forgiveness, selika, then you have reached a place where you are able to stop flogging yourself in punishment for having committed a wrong or an offense against someone else. You do not beat yourself up for your shortcomings. That doesn't mean that you do not hold yourself accountable for your behavior. It does not mean that the way that you treat other people is not important after all, because you just instantly forgive yourself for everything that you do. It does not mean that you do not hold yourself to the correct standards going forward. This is simply a pardon for the punishment. It is forgoing the flogging. When you achieve mekala, you are erasing what is owed. You are not trying to make up for an existing debt that has put you into the red. Once again, that does not mean that you are not holding yourself to the standards that you should be holding yourself to going forward. It means that you are starting from zero, and moving forward, you will behave in ways that are fiscally responsible. But you are not treating yourself as though you are already behind and must make up for a debt that is still on the ledgers that you record and keep against yourself. But this kind of forgiveness does not mean that you are not responsible for making your wrongs right and for making amends to others to the best of your ability, because you are. The Bible is very clear about that. See Matthew chapter 5, verses 23 through 26. It just means that in your own personal ledgers, you are not trying to earn your way back to a starting point from way behind the mark, forever lacking no matter what, because the records of every wrong that you have ever done haunts you like a bad credit score. If you ever achieve kapara, then the stains have been washed away, and they are no longer a factor that continues to enter into the picture to plague you in the first place. But you will simply not reach that place on your own. That level of forgiveness cannot be achieved without God. As a side note, it should be acknowledged that while the description of these three words is not something that is debated, the order, as far as which word represents the highest level of forgiveness, is the subject of several different theories. There are those who believe that kapara, washing out the residue or covering the offense, is actually the first level of forgiveness, while mekala, providing a waiver for the debt that was owed, remains the mediary level of forgiveness, and selika, as a pardon for the crime, is actually the highest level of forgiveness. And there is certainly a case to be made for ordering these words in either direction. But the focus shouldn't be on how you rank these different types of forgiveness. It is not a video game, and you are not being scored or graded on your assessment. Your main focus should be on what these various types of forgiveness actually are, what they entail, and which kind of forgiveness is appropriate to the situation that you are in. And remember, forgiveness is liberating to the person who is carrying around inside of them the poison that they have drunk. It purges that from their system and allows them to move forward in health. If the other person involved even wants the forgiveness, and they might not, but if they do and they receive it, it can be healing for them as well. And the highest experience when it comes to liberation, the highest form that exists anywhere, is to be able to stand before the purest source of all standards without shame, because He has removed your impurity, and you don't even have the power to revive a stain that He has now made non-existent, or to pay a debt that He does not recognize as even existing, or to reinstate a penalty that He has officially pardoned. Once you are free, and make no mistake, forgiveness is freedom, then you can experience all of the other wonderful things that await you in a non-poisoned version of existence. And we will start getting into those gems next time. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, I would ask you to please help me build this podcast into a success by clicking the like and follow buttons, because that is what does the trick in making these things successful, and it doesn't cost anything to do. Plus, it lets me know which kind of content you are enjoying so that I can make more of that kind of content. And I hope that you come back again next week. Until then, have a good week, my friends.